Okay guys, as you can see, the car is 100% done now. I had finished up all the hard stuff, the coolant, the pulleys, the catch can, the intake. You've seen all those videos, but this was finalizing the install. What I had to do was I had left the early fuel Evap line. I hadn't finished that. This line right here, you can see, plugs into the Evap purge solenoid. Now it's called an Evap, I would call it a purge tube. So it's the early evaporation fuel emissions line, whatever you want to call it. I plugged it into the front sensor. I ran it in between the coolant hoses for the intercooler, up, back around the intake. And then you probably can't see it, but it actually plugs in to where the stock line is. It's way back there, right underneath the fuel line. Now that line, I don't think I tweaked that much when I adjusted the factory fuel line coming back from the firewall. I just put a socket on that one, and I very slowly bent that toward this way, probably like 20 degrees, like I said earlier. I don't think I touched the Evap fuel line. It may have come with it a little bit, so your install may vary, but this fuel line is actually off of a CTS-V. I'll include the part number below, but I had the ZL1, that evaporation fuel line, but the problem with that is that line literally went back and then ended right there, probably on the second cylinder from the firewall. So that fuel line wasn't going to work. So I ended up ordering the CTS-V one. I think it was like $13. You know what's sad? Yeah, the CTS-V one was only like $12 or $13. I think I paid $24 for the ZL1 fuel line, and that one was a lot shorter. Like, it was probably a half foot shorter. So use the CTS-V one. You may have to tweak the fittings a little bit, where the clip-on fitting is. I think I maybe had to twist it a little bit, but that just twists inside the tubing. There's no big deal with that. So CTS-V for the Evap line. So after I finished the evaporation fuel line, I installed the Pcv system. Now on this car, I'm running the LSA valve coverage just like the Corvette. However, unlike the Corvette, this car still has the LS3 valley port, vent port, so that still has the vent in the valley cover going up to the catch can and then going into the blower itself. So I wanted to kind of stay with the stock setup, and the way I have this set up now, it's pretty much 100% ZL1 minus the catch can. So how this works is this front port, which is buried, it's behind the oil cap. This front port connects with the driver's side rear port. I had that capped off, but since I wanted to keep this pretty much stock, I uncapped it. I just had some tape over that. So those two ports connect. See this line here? They connect into one line. Now this line is feeding underneath the ABS, the brake booster brake hose, and I have it connecting to a check valve. Then I have that check valve going into my aftermarket intake, my custom aftermarket intake. And how I installed this was, this check valve happens to be fit almost perfectly inside the ZL1 line. So I have it going in there, drilled a hole in the 90-degree tube that I got from Spectre, put a grommet in it, and as you can see, I can't pull it out. I drilled the hole just wide enough for that O-ring, for that grommet O-ring to slip in there. Just use a little bit of pressure. I actually ruined a grommet, so I have 40 of them. So the second one, I used a little bit less pressure, and I got it in there just fine. So that's staying there. And then I just kind of bent the factory Pcv line, and it's sitting. It's sitting kind of funny, but it should work. This isn't, you have to use a little bit of pressure to pull that off. So I think that'll work. Besides, it's just a Pcv line. It should be fine. So that's connecting to the check valve. The check valve is going into the intake. Now the reason I put a check valve there is because I don't want any oil coming from the valve covers and going into the intake itself. So with that check valve being there, it'll stop the flow of any oil coming through. Now with this ZL1 setup, you know, with the catch can and the check valve, I really shouldn't have a problem because this car has the valley vent port. Now when I got rid of it on the Corvette, because the Corvette has such a low hood, Edelbrock sells you a thinner valley port. That really was causing me hellacious oiling issues. Like, it was sucking up oil from the driver's side. It was getting sucked into the supercharger through that port on the side here. On the Edelbrock, that port's actually on the driver's side. So it was literally sucking up oil from the valve cover, going straight into the side of the supercharger, and it was sucking oil out of the blower, so right into the blower, and I was getting thrown through the exhaust. So when I had PCV, real bad PCV issues with the Corvette with it burning oil. As soon as I added that check valve catch can on the Corvette, it got rid of all the problems. Now with this car, it being pretty much stock, it's gonna have the vent lines. And I actually asked people on the SS forums how they ran theirs, and I saw some diagrams on the G8 boards, same car basically. And basically everyone, you could either cap off the driver's rear and just run a tube from the passenger front to the intake. But with the ZL1, it's the same setup basically. It has the driver's rear, passenger front, connecting in one tube going into the intake. So that should be fine. You know, if I have issues, I can always cap the rear, and then I'll just get a hose, move that PCV valve, and I'll just run it to the passenger side. So I'm not really too worried. If I have any issues with this, I can always modify it, but for now, this should work fine. So that's the final steps on the SS, and next is gonna be a dyno session and driving. Here's the first attempt at firing the car. Without a proper tune, it's not going to run, so all that it's doing is firing and then it stalls out. Thanks for watching my video. Don't forget to like it, and if you haven't already, please subscribe.